This is a Viva PR podcast.
I like to be creative and, do things differently. And I actually like to make a difference. It's no secret that one of the patients there was Ian Brady. And I remember that day, the phones were just ringing off the hook. He was sat on a toilet with his trousers round his ankles and the strapline was dog fouling my arse.
From fax machines to lab Bible, from carrier pigeons to sextortion warnings, it's fair to say that this episode of PR in the Real World covers some bases. I'm Tony Garner, and this is Viva's podcast about the real-life experiences of comms professionals on the front line. Today's guest, Ginette Unsworth, who's head of comms for Lancashire-based University UCLan, and she takes us on a fascinating journey through the ever-evolving landscape of comms. From media storms at high-security hospitals to behaviour change campaigns tackling a dog fouling epidemic, we get through loads. One common thread throughout is how to come up with punchy, creative campaigns on a shoestring. Let's crack on. So, Ginette, welcome to PR in the Real World.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
You've had a fascinating career. Can we turn the clock right back to what drew you into the industry in the first instance?
Yeah, I'm probably going to really show my age here, Tony. So back in the day when I was choosing university, I just wanted to do a subject that I really liked, and I really liked English. And at that time, and it makes me laugh actually thinking about now where I work at university and all the great websites we have and the marketing and everything, that actually at college, you just had a big book that you looked through of all the universities and what courses they ran. And I really wanted to go and study in Yorkshire. Don't know why, but I wanted to study in Leeds and Sheffield. And I found this course that was English and media. I didn't really know what the media bit was, but I thought, that sounds interesting, And so I went and studied that. I liked the English, but I absolutely loved the media bit. And it was all types of media. So it was PR, it was marketing, it was publications, it was broadcast. So in the first year, you did all of those different things. And then you kind of specialised as you went through. And what was really good, and a lot of universities do this, which I think is really helpful. Yeah. In my first year, I had a placement at Yorkshire Electricity. And then in my second year, I had a placement at what was called the Central Office of Information. It doesn't actually exist in that form now, but it was kind of PR for government in the regions. Yeah. So it's covering Leeds and Yorkshire and Humber. So I got a placement there, and then they took me on. So I did the press cuttings for them while I was still at university in my second and third year. And then when I finished, I actually got a job there. So Excellent. It was really good introduction. Getting that first job's really difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, did some really enjoyed working there. Some really interesting stuff for Yorkshire and the Humber.
And I guess that first foot in the door and understanding what that world you were entering into is all about as well is always difficult when you've never been there.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a very different world then. When I think back, there wasn't email. Oh. And if you wrote a press release, then you faxed it if it was important. But we had, because it was for the whole of Yorkshire and Humber, so there was a lot of media outlets, whether that was broadcast, print. We had all of these pigeonholes, so a big room full of pigeonholes, and you printed out your press release and you put it in the pigeonhole of the relevant media outlet. And at the end of the day, someone kind of got all these together, put them in an envelope and posted them out. So it was a very different world if I think back to where we are now.
So not literally pigeons. I mean, I can remember, I similar kind of vintage, and I used to be a sports reporter, and one of the guys who used to take me to Blackburn Rovers for matches just for a giggle at night to be his bag carrier literally described the fact that they used to have pigeons from the press box that used to fly back to the office in Blackburn Town Centre in his working life. But we have moved on a wee bit.
We have.
You moved from the Central Office of Information to Ashworth Hospital.
Yeah, no, I went straight from the Central Office of Information to Ashworth Hospital. So I was wanting to move back to the Lancashire area because I had my boyfriend lived there, and that's where I was from originally. So I was looking for jobs in the northwest area, and Ashworth Hospital came up. And when I was younger, I really kind of was into crime, and I was debating whether I wanted to go in the police or whether I wanted to do law. So actually, this place of PR. It was the NHS, but 80% of the people in there had committed a serious crime. So it was one of only 3 special hospitals in the whole country.
Yeah.
Another one was Broadmoor. Another one was in the Nottingham area as well. So it's no secret, it's well reported that one of the patients there was Ian Brady. And there was a lot of other patients who some of them committed horrendous crimes, so were quite notorious. So actually doing PR for there was a very interesting role.
Ian Brady was one of the Moors murderers, and around at that time and growing up, there were stories appeared about him and Myra Hindley almost week in, week out in the national media. It must have been a busy press office. Were there a lot of you in that team? Or?
Not at all. There was myself and my manager. So I was in my early 20s. We did on-call. So I had the on-call phone every other week. And every single weekend we got a call, not just about Ian Brady, but sometimes, all of these people in there, they had a severe mental illness.
Yes.
And so lots of things went wrong. So they set fires to wards. Unfortunately, some staff were attacked. So there was a lot of calls that you got at the weekend. And it was the time when News of the World was around and the Sunday People. And there was a lot of calls on a Saturday night around those things. And, it was a steep learning curve. It was my first big job, and actually dealing with those nationals every weekend was really good experience for me.
Yeah, talk about being thrown in at the deep end.
I know, definitely. Yeah.
So thinking back, how do you deal with something like that early on? You must have had a good manager and a good process, I guess.
Yeah, my manager was really good, really supportive, and there was some negative stuff. It was crisis PR very often, but also some really, really good proactive stuff that we did.
Yeah.
We worked with patients who were doing art projects, produced amazing stuff. We did an exhibition at the Tate in Liverpool and Albert Dock, so we did some really good stuff. But one of the things that really stands out for me was the time of the mad cow disease, the beef crisis, and all of that was going on. And I don't know if you remember CJD, where people were fearing actually they were going to catch this from eating beef. Yeah. And some of our patients were worried about eating beef and made complaints to the hospital that they didn't want to have beef as part of their diet. Yeah. Well, as all these things get leaked, so we had stories in all the nationals, patients not even wanting to eat beef, and the crazy anyway, so what's the problem? And headlines like chicken in a basket case, chicken vindaloo, all of these crazy things that you were dealing with. So it was a really baptism and fire, but really good actually for future roles where you could actually relate all of this experience.
Let's move on from there then. What was next?
So I kind of flip, if I think about it, in my career from a job that's really kind of proactive, like the one that I'm currently in now, to kind of crisis PR. So the Ashworth was definitely crisis PR. But then I went to work for Keep Britain Tidy.
Right.
The head office based in Wigan, so in the northwest region, but covered the whole of the UK, and at the beginning including Scotland and Ireland too. So a really big job. I started off running like some campaigns and eventually became head of marketing and communications there. So did some really, really exciting stuff. I was there 14 years actually. Wow. A lot of really positive, creative work that we did there, and it was a charity, so it was just really making a difference to society.
Tell us about some of the campaign stories that you were involved in that you're really proud of. Or...
I think one of the ones that really stands out for me is that we did a lot of research, so all of our campaigns and activity was based on research, and we were a charity, so we were part funded at the time by government and also sponsors, but we didn't have loads of money, compared to the big brands, so we had to be very creative in our thinking. So we did some research, and actually people were afraid of rats, and it was a true fact that actually rats were getting closer to society because of all the fast food that was being dropped. And actually there was a fact that, you're never more than, 8 foot away from a rat.
Yeah.
So we decided to play on this. So we had an advertising campaign that ran across the country on bus shelters, and we created a cinema advert as well, where part of it was about, how rats were getting closer, and the end frame, 2 people were in bed, and a car lights went across the window and you could see rats on the end of the bed. It was horrible, but it had great cut through with the audience. But we were really thinking of, okay, what can we do alongside that PR-wise to kind of match it to get that attention in the media? And actually, photographing a rat is really tricky, isn't it?
I've never tried it, but I'm getting. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and how could journalists get these rat photographs? So we had a big perspex kind of structure made, and this was kind of one of the weirdest
rat
things.
Box.
Yeah, but see-through,
Yes.
and we had all levels, and across all the levels we put all the different types of fast food.
Yeah.
And I found a rat breeder. Well, it was animal acting, actually. So they bred these rats for acting purposes. So we had to, and it was all done ethically.
Yeah.
But we had to wait, obviously, for these rats to be bred, and then we could put them in this perspex tank, so journalists could get a real close-up of rats in action eating fast food. And to tie in with the actual cinema advert, we replicated the bed scene. So we hired in London, there's Soho Square, and there's a cinema on there.
Yeah.
So we used the cinema to show all the journalists the screening of the cinema ad, but also we had a bed and the 2 actors who were in bed and all the rats on there. So there were so many media opportunities, whether that was the trailer for the cinema ad, getting the close-up of the rats. We got so much national coverage, and it was on News at 10, so that was a bit of a kind of big moment that I do remember as part of working at that organisation.
When we were chatting before we hit the record button, you mentioned that you, at the organisation you used a lot of celebrities as well. That because you were a charity, you were able to hook into some key celebrities without throwing a load of budget their way as well. So how did that work out?
Yeah, it was a time where lots of organisations did use celebrities, and we did have to pay for them, but not the great sums that you just mentioned because of the charity status. So one thing, we also, it was Keep It Tidy, but we also did green initiatives, and we had something called Planet Pledge, which is about saving the planet, and part of that we did some adverts on the back of lollipop ladies. Right. So for the launch, we used Anthea Turner, dressed as a lollipop lady with this message on the back, but on Abbey Road, and we got lookalike Beatles to create that Abbey Road Beatles cover.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that got some really good coverage. We also we wanted also to do it without actually paying for people.
Yes.
So one of the things that we did was we did an advert in The Guardian saying, we're looking for celebrity endorsement. All we're looking for is maybe 2 full days a year, doing some media, being really supportive of the campaign. And at that time, social media, especially Twitter, was just taking off. Right. So we used that as well, alongside the advert, and also media to push the fact that we were looking for these celebrities. And Kirsty Allsop replied on Twitter and said, "Oh gosh, I would absolutely love this job." So that was, as far as I know, she's a massive advocate still of Keep Britain Tidy, and even though we're only looking for this commitment for a year, she did it for years after, and I think she's probably still involved too. I ended up going to a house for lunch, which was also really interesting. She lived on this amazing road, and her house was like a really 70s looking house, and she was like, "You always have the worst house on the road, so you can look out on all the best ones."
Location.
Yes, definitely.
You mentioned earlier that during that time, using data and insights was really important. Was that kind of something, clearly at the Ashworth it was something you were able to do, but here a lot more, I guess?
Yeah, and I think, my career started out just definite PR, but as I progressed, it was PR and marketing. And this was kind of, at this role at Keep It Tidy, marketing played a big role in understanding audience and how to target the message. So that was obviously with the advertising, but also the PR. So, you might remember back in the day, and hopefully this is one of the things that I've managed to change in society, is that dog fouling was really prevalent. And there was white dog poo everywhere, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's a nice childhood memory you've dredged up.
Childhood memory. So I think it must have been in the early 2000s, we ran a campaign to try and eradicate dog fouling. And we'd done a lot of research into understanding the types of people that littered, the types of people that let their dog foul. And one of these groups that we identified for dog foulers, we called the justifier. So they were always making an excuse. Oh, there was no bin. Oh, I didn't see my dog do it, all of that. So part of the campaign was breaking down those barriers. But we also kind of understood what demographic those people were. And they tended to be someone who was more likely to read The Sun, The Star, those kind of newspapers. So our launch had to really align with that kind of audience. So we used Ricky Tomlinson, who was big in the royal family at that time. We had him on Clapham Common in London, which we called Crapham Common. He was sat on a toilet with his trousers round his ankles, and the strapline was "dog fouling my arse." And again, that got massive coverage in the right newspapers to target the right audiences. We had the Channel 4's Big Breakfast, which was really big at the time, again, the right audience, all fitting in with that message. So alongside the advertising campaign across the country, which actually was a 6-foot bus stop image of a big horrible pile of poo, and above it there was three versions. One said no and then the poo, one said tough and the poo, and another said bull and then the poo. And the ASA actually did challenge us on that, because they were saying that actually for school children that wasn't appropriate. But we won that argument, because actually unless you knew those words anyway, you weren't actually going to understand what it meant. But actually that campaign alone had a massive effect on dog fouling, and it was using that data and that insight to really get the right media. Because it's not just about getting any media coverage, is it? It's getting the right media coverage for who you're trying to target. And we did lots of analysing of parks where we had councils on our own staff going up like a lawnmower measuring how many dog poos there were in parks. So, it was a really effective. We reduced dog fouling something like about 70% in that campaign. We won loads of awards for it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because now it's completely antisocial, and it's a way that society has changed.
Really good.
You do see it, but it's mostly you see dog walkers carrying their little bags with them as well.
You do.
From another shift in gears, you went from Keep It Tidy to head of comms at Lancashire County Council. Yeah,
so I was ready for a bit more crisis, obviously, at that point, a bit more balance. So, working for a council, again, really interesting. When I was working at Keep It Tidy, that organisation had 200 staff. So then I went to work for an organisation that, including the schools in Lancashire, employed 30,000 people. Right. So massive, complex organisation, and just very, very different. So very focused on PR, and also, a lot of chance to be positive, but also a lot of reactive news required. But there, not only were we managing all the media stuff, but, we managed the website. We got a chance to do marketing. We did some great campaigns for fostering adoption, other things like that. And just a really interesting job, because actually, what you're doing, what councils are doing, are really trying to make a difference to communities and people's lives. unfortunately, when I started, I think I'm a jinx really, because it was councils were the land of plenty then.
Yeah.
And then very shortly after me joining, there was a lot of cuts that started, that just every year more and more cuts. So we've seen across, local government for years now.
So that was the start of the austerity period.
It was. There was a lot of managing messages about having to make changes to social care, cutting money invested on roads, which obviously, people paying the council tax, they want to have that service they've always had.
Yeah.
So helping manage that message was a key part of the role.
I seem to remember as well, Eric Pickles at the time launching a bit of a tirade against council comms and having your own council newspapers and stuff. And we moved from having, and when I started, there was a council newspaper, and we moved from having that, and we had digital newspapers, and obviously in that period, social media has started to really grow. So that was a real good tool to get messages out to people and keep people updated. What have you learned then during that period? You've moved from a national campaigning organisation to dealing with officers and politicians who are probably wanting you to be at the beck and call all the time to kind of solve a particular mini issue on their street, etc.
Yes, and when you work for a local authority, your role, especially in comms, is to be apolitical. So, I was at the council for 9 years. I worked across both a Conservative and Labour leadership, and you're there to help serve the people of Lancashire. So you're not there to promote a political party, but to promote the work of what is being delivered in that council. So getting that balance right is really important. But at the end of the day, the council is wanting to do a great job for their communities.
Yeah.
But I suppose, for Lancashire, with its structure, and it's now changing, isn't it, as a result. But, you had the county council, you had the unitaries of Blackburn and Blackpool, but then you had 12 districts. So balancing, how the investment that the county council wanted to do in economic development terms, for example, was tricky, because if they invested in Preston, where they were located, then the east of Lancashire weren't happy. So there was always a big balancing act, and so that the whole of Lancashire felt served by that county.
Yeah, a tricky one that as well, because we are parochial at that kind of grassroots level, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. And each of those, I think there were 64 councillors, and each one was wanting to look after their own area. Of course they were. Yeah. So getting that balance right for the politicians, it was always tricky.
Did you have a big comms team to serve?
Yeah, there was it fluctuated between 25 and 30 people, but that wasn't all media stuff. So that was social media, internal comms, website, marketing, strategic communications. So a really great team who's worked there for a long time.
Now, again, before we started recording, you mentioned that you had another food scandal that hit.
It seems to follow me around this, doesn't it? Yeah, so there was, I don't know if you remember the horse meat crisis. So
vaguely, it rang bells. Yeah, I seem to remember horse meat appearing in food for schools. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think there was a fear across the UK that horse meat was being used instead of beef. And Lancashire County Council had its own scientific unit that could analyse food. Right. So it analysed some of the food that was going into the schools and actually identified that in 47 schools in this cottage pie, horse meat was being used as a substitute for beef. So it was this one supplier. Yeah. So we were very proactive in actually, we need to be upfront, tell people, remove beef from menus. But obviously when we went out with that message, then schools, parents were very concerned. Had their child eaten this? Was it unsafe? And it wasn't unsafe. It wasn't a health issue. And I remember that day, the phones were just ringing off the hook. Yeah. So we did lots of comms that we could give to schools to send out to parents. We made sure that we put vegetarian options and lots of children children just went for a while eating only vegetarian meals because they didn't trust the meat options. For those people who needed halal food or different dietary requirements, there was a lot that went on in that period. But yeah, it was one of those days where we had a switchboard and we had to actually start rerouting all of these calls to make sure that we could deal with all the inquiries coming through.
It's amazing, this world, isn't it? That you just don't know what's going to come around the corner.
Yeah.
It's a kind of classic example of that, isn't it?
It is.
Nobody, when you took on that role, would have, horse meat would not have been one of the things that you'd have been planning for.
Not at all, but that's what makes a role in kind of comms marketing so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because no day's the same.
No.
And whether it's a real kind of positive story that's kind of absolutely gone out there or gone viral, or whether it's something that's a bit of a crisis that you're having to deal with, you're always on your toes and you're always learning something new. So I think that's why I like working in this area so much.
Yeah. At Lancashire, and this might be a bit unfair, but what was the biggest kind of challenge? Was it the political side of things, or was it the officers, or was it residents' expectations of what the council should be doing for them?
Yeah, I probably would say it was the austerity measures, really, because, budgets were continually cut year on year.
Yeah.
And the expectations of residents was, well, actually, all the potholes in my road, and you'll probably know that actually local authority budgets, a massive percentage of them are linked to social care.
Yes.
Because we've got this growing older population. So most of the budget went to that. Quite rightly, because we need to look after people. But actually that means that only the most vulnerable in society, so when you're paying your council tax, actually you might not benefit from all of those. So the things that you see every day, like the potholes or whatever, weren't getting as much attention. So balancing that message, I suppose, was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, no, interesting. So that was the council, and then you moved on from the... Roughly when?
5 years ago. So I've been at the University of Central Lancashire, soon to be, we're moving now to the University of Lancashire, which will be fully in that from September. So yes, 5 years I've been there now, but I started right at the end of 2019, so just before Christmas. Then came into the office in January to COVID having broken out in China. And of course, lots of universities have Chinese students. So really working at the university, we were hot on this right from January, whereas other organisations might not have really got a grip until further in March, when it became more of an issue in this country. Yeah. So, daily meetings on this, and eventually obviously going into lockdown in March. So my introduction to the university was quite a strange one, because I'd only just started working there, only physically in the office, and then 18 months more or less working from home. Yeah. And a lot of that initial content was around COVID related issues for staff and students, really, because the government was changing on, as we remember, like a weekly basis on the rules, and the rules for students and study was complicated. So there was lots of work to do on that.
And again, in Lancashire, it was one of the hotspot areas for a while, wasn't it?
It was. And then we had that strange situation where some areas, and, for the university, we've got campuses in Preston and Burnley. Some of them were under different rules. Having people who go to the university in Preston, even within Preston and South Ribble, there were different rules on where you could go out, where you could eat. So, we actually got to a stage, the internal comms team, where we were preempting what Boris was going to say at 7:00 at night. So writing it, listening to what he said, sending it to the Vice-Chancellor and the leadership saying, OK, are we happy to put this out? Yeah. And it was confusing for students. And we had, students could come in and be taught. So they were taught online for a long time, but then could come in, but they needed to be tested 2 or 3 times a week. So we had to set up COVID testing units for staff and students so they could actually come in and study. Yeah.
Our producer Dan's getting flashbacks now, because you're describing, I think, his university experience, which clearly wasn't what he had planned when he was...
No, I don't think anyone had that planned, did we? But as a university, I think we did a great job in trying to make the most it, and when we could get students back in, we did everything to make sure they could come back in safely. We managed the timetables well, so not everyone was on campus at the same time, and as we say, doing this testing. And unfortunately, and I hope Dan wasn't one of these, that there was a year where we couldn't have graduations.
Yeah.
And we were one of the first universities to graduate students and do all the backlog. So in that September of 2021, I think it was, we had 2 solid weeks of graduation, of graduating all the students who'd been through that period and giving them a great experience.
Just tell us about the scale of the university. I mean, I have to kind of mention that it's got a place in my heart because that's where I did my journalism training back in the 80s. But I think it's probably grown a bit since then.
Yes. It's a really big university, about 36,000 students.
Right.
We've got partnerships with over 100 countries worldwide, so our alumni are all over the world. We've got campuses in Preston, Burnley and West Lakes in Cumbria, and there's also a campus in Cyprus. Just over 3,000 staff.
Wow.
So similar to the council, a very large, complex organisation, because the number of courses that the university runs is around 600-700 different courses.
Yeah.
Obviously very popular for journalism as it's been in the past, but now very popular for veterinary medicine. We're just opening a new vet school in the next few months, and we do medicine, we do dentistry, we do pharmacy. So not all universities of what we call post-92 universities do all of these kind of courses.
Right. How important, given that kind of size and structure, 36,000 students, 3,000 staff, is internal comms a big part of what you do?
Yeah, it's a massive part, and I'd say, obviously the PR is really important, and we do loads of great positive stories. But the pressure comes really from the internal communications, because there is so much to be telling staff and students, a lot to celebrate. So going back to where I said I'm going from crisis, this is definitely a very positive job.
Yeah.
Lots to talk about, lots of good stories, but also operationally for students who are on our campuses, we need to tell them everything from, this cafe's opening or doing a discount this week, to we've done some great research with our students, be proud of what we've achieved. So there's so much messaging that we have for students as well as staff. There's a lot of work to be done there.
And do you get the chance to do proactive campaigns aimed at the students as well?
Yes, we do. And, again, very small budgets. So I think this is kind of a thing what I like, trying to be creative with a small budget. For students, we've done 2 campaigns recently. There's a campaign called When It's Wrong, It's Wrong, and that's won about 3 awards now. Because unfortunately, students are coming to university, they might have financial issues, they might, there's a lot of mental health issues going on now. And because of the prevalence of social media, I think we're finding, aren't we, in society, that, back in my day where you had the phone in the hallway and your mum and dad could hear your conversation. There's conversations, there's harassment, there's bullying that goes online, and actually sometimes that is upsetting for students. They need more support. So we ran a campaign called When It's Wrong, It's Wrong, and we did toilet stickers on mirrors in all the toilets in our campuses. We did posters, we did message on screens, and it was things like, if people are sending images of you against your will, when it's wrong, it's wrong. This is where you can get support. If someone's telling you how to dress or telling you what to do, it's wrong. So really calling out some behaviours that we'd seen from other students of kind of harassment, sexual harassment and bullying. And we had a massive recall on that campaign. I think we only spent about £3,000 on it, and it's won some great awards. So that was one. And then we've recently done another one around your online footprint.
Right.
Because again, young people coming to university, there's still still making those online mistakes and not thinking about actually what you do online now will be there potentially forever and can have an impact on your future. And it just brought it home, actually. I watched The Apprentice when it was the interviews last week, and one of them, who's wanting to run a business, in the interviews they pulled out some social media post he'd done a number of years ago, which wasn't very aligned to his brand and was detrimental to him, really. So we did this for students, and we did 3 videos which we used obviously online on our social media channels. Again, they've been nominated for awards, and the strapline was, if you regret it, forget it. Because actually what you post when you're 18 and then you're looking for, and you might be like slagging off Network Rail or the train companies because they haven't got you there on time, and then in 10 years time when you try and get a job with them, then actually that might not work out. So, and also there's a lot of sextortion going on, unfortunately. We hear this, a lot of international students are coming and being vulnerable and actually saying, you know, people are fishing and saying, oh yeah, pretending they're in a relationship with somebody, and then they're trying to bribe them for money and getting images sent through. So we've done a lot of work on that.
You mentioned one earlier as well before we started. You'd done an energy campaign that brought a smile.
Yeah, and in particular I was targeting staff because, you know, as we know, energy bills soared, didn't they, a few years ago. Businesses were no exception. Our energy bills were absolutely massive, and it was about what each, 3,000 staff, that's a lot of savings that could be made, what we can all individually do to help reduce that energy bill. So, we did central operational things like turn the thermostat down a bit, not that individuals can influence that, but things like shutting windows, turning off lights, just a very basic thing of turning off your monitor. So actually not leaving your monitor on overnight or all over the weekend could save a lot of money. And we have a lot of lecture theatres, so turning off that system, not leaving it on for the next person that might not be coming in for the next 3 hours. So we did a big campaign around that. But we also have a preschool for our students and staff. So we've got all these little children. So we did a great thing where we sent the video team in, and we did interviews with like these 2, 3, 4-year-olds about what saving energy was for them. And then we created little superheroes, energy saving superheroes. So actually staff were seeing their own children or their colleagues' children on this video, and it's a bit like I don't know, it was a long time ago, but that Kids Talk programme that was on TV where all kids say the funniest things. The things that they came out with were really funny. Like one of them said, oh, it's not like it's like Blackpool Tower in here with all the Blackpool illuminations, all these lights on. So there's some really funny things that they came out with that really resonated with staff, and actually we've made £500,000 saving to our energy bill as a result of that campaign.
Oh, excellent. So we love that when we can tell stories that land with impact on relatively small budgets.
Definitely. And I think in all my career I've had to do that. So think very creatively on what we can do to get that cut through, but without a lot of money.
Just reminds me of I was at a PR awards a few years back, and we were pipped at the post on the low budget campaign, and I went across to the winners and I congratulated the team there, and the boss of the agency said, I'm sick of winning the low budget.
I want to work something where it's got millions of pounds to spend.
We've talked about the internal side of things at UCLan, but obviously the work and the research that you generate there, you're still hitting national headlines as well. Yeah,
definitely. The work that the university does is absolutely amazing, and that's what makes the job so exciting, because the breadth of work we do and the stories that we've got to tell and the great facilities that we have. So, we do a lot of work with the NHS. We did recently, one of our PhD students called Alexia Lopez discovered some cosmic structures, one called the Big Ring, that story got international, global coverage. Again, our emails, the phones were ringing off the hook. The interviews that she did, she's just actually won an Educate North Award as a PhD University Student of the Year.
Wow.
Very talented young lady, and we had the privilege of helping tell her story. And she'll go on to do great things because, you know, we're at the cutting edge. We're making a difference. We're doing research that's making a difference to people's lives, you know, working on things linked to dementia. We've got something called an exoskeleton that kind of is a thing that you can put on your body and supports movement. So there's loads of great work that the university's doing, and my kind of media team are just constantly looking for those stories and what we can do.
How do you unearth them? Because that must be one of the challenges that
It
your
is.
team has got.
It
That
is.
all this work's going on in these probably like different silos, and sometimes you'll hear about things that the time's gone and I wish we'd have known about that sooner.
I know, you're absolutely right. That is one of the biggest challenges. And the media team are really on it at the moment, trying to make those connections with the right people in the university.
Yeah.
And, you know, a piece of research can take a long time.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, you decide what you want to do, then you get the right permissions and ethics if that's required. You need to carry out the research. Often it goes as a publication, so the timing of when that happens is really important. But we don't want to just know about it at the last minute, because we could get loads of assets to help build up that story. So getting to know about it at the right point. So we're having lots of conversations to work out, okay, which are the real big newsworthy stories? When's the right point that we start working with those academics on those? But yeah, there's some great things in the pipeline.
Interesting. And I guess loads of different audiences as well, that when you're looking at one particular project, you could split it out a number of different ways.
Yeah, and some topics are, you know, very general and will go across, you know, many of the national media. But, you know, there's some things. So a lot of our media stuff is probably influencing parents, really. In reality, you know, younger people aren't consuming, you know, some of the journalism in the same way as their parents may do, or the sector as well, you know, using that to give credibility to the university. But when you're trying to get a message in those to that younger audience who might want to come and study, you know, a place like Lad Bible is a really good way of actually hitting the audience in a different way. So quite recently we were successful in having expert comment from one of our academics on the use of Amazon Fire Sticks or dodgy sticks, where, you know, lots of young people are now streaming, especially to watch a lot of sport, and obviously it's illegal.
Yeah.
But what the story was about is actually not only are they trying to crack down on that from the legality of it, but actually the people who are doing this probably have access to a lot of your data and could be using it and selling it on in a different way. So actually there are risks to yourself. So my media manager, Carl, is from the Northeast, and he said that's the only time that any of his mates really engaged in any work that he's ever done because of that story. So, yeah. Getting the right story for the right audience is really important.
What do you love about this role then, when you kind of reflect on the different places you've landed?
I've been privileged across my whole career to work with some amazing teams, and this team that I work with now is no exception. Yeah. They're so can-do. I manage the media, internal comms, and also events. And events is a bit of a different portfolio than my previous career. So there's a lot of exciting things that we do, a lot of feel-good things like graduation, open days, all of those things. So, yeah, I absolutely love the team that I work with. We work hard, but we have fun as well. Yeah. But also the university, it's just such a great place to work. It's absolutely committed to supporting the students that go there. One of our values is about being supportive, and all the people that work there are genuine. They go above and beyond to help the students and just make a great experience. So anyone that comes to the open days, they really can sense that in the staff. So I do feel really proud to work there. And we do some great stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously my team have that privilege in telling those stories, and I find out whether it's promoting that internally or externally. It's just, it's a great place to work.
I'm guessing you've got a big team there?
It's not a massive team, no, 15, and that's including all the events as well. So again, being very creative, using our time wisely is really important to make sure that we get the right messages, whether that is externally or internally.
Again, looking back over this career so far, you've spanned lots of different eras. What stayed the same, do you think, in that? What's been the kind of golden threads that you've pulled on, and then what's completely changed?
I think what stayed the same and always will stay the same is what makes a story.
Yeah.
And, those key elements of understanding the newsworthiness of something, the audience and where to place that story, that's always remained the same. What's very different is obviously social media and how people consume that news now. So when I was giving those examples of working at Ashworth Hospital where, something was on fire, that'd only get to the media if it was leaked. Whereas now, if that happened, say, at the university, the first you'd hear about it was on social media.
Yeah.
So being able to manage that very quickly and is a challenge, isn't it, when there's a crisis, because you need to reassure, but people have got footage.
Yeah.
So that makes the world a very different place, and also obviously a lot of fake news that goes on social media as well. So that's very different. I think what also has remained the same is that actually you can be really creative, and we've talked about low budgets, but that's something that really interests me throughout my career, is trying to be creative, trying to be a bit different, trying to make you stand out from the crowd.
Yeah.
And I think that all has flowed through all of the jobs that I've done, and that's the bit that I really enjoy.
You've talked a lot about, as well as low budgets though, you've kind of aligned that with doing your research. And I guess that must be the fuel when you've not got the money to throw at something, then you need something to be the spark, and that seems to be something that you've said a lot, that the data and the insights drive that creativity.
Yeah, definitely. The research of knowing what you're trying to achieve and how to achieve it is really, really important, and that data. And so that kind of link between marketing and PR is really vital. And also it's really helpful because, working in any organisation, if you work in this field, those non-specialists always think they know the channel, or back in the day it was, I want a poster, I want a press release. Now it's, I need a social media post. And actually they don't always need those things. And getting back to thinking about what you're trying to achieve, how we're going to measure this, how do we know this is an issue, is really important to help build your case, to know and help them to achieve what they need to do. So understanding that data and measurement and impact, because actually we are specialists, aren't we? We've studied this, we've done it for many, many years. If we were all to just kind of do what the non-specialists were saying, then maybe the impact wouldn't be quite the same.
So finally, I'm going to wrap things up by asking my classic question here about what advice would you give to somebody joining the industry now, or your younger self if you were just coming into the industry? What would you be telling them to be kind of focused on or look to?
I think working in PR is, like we said, a great job because no day is the same.
Yeah.
Everything, can change very, very quickly, either positively or negatively, and it gives you great experience and exposure. My career has mainly been kind of in the public type sector, and I think why I do that is because I like to be creative and, do things differently, and I actually like to make a difference. And, you know, at the university where we are now, you know, our vision is to transform lives, and knowing that you're transforming somebody's life actually gives a lot back to me personally. So I get a lot out of actually helping society, whether that's working for a council, you know, improving the environment through litter, or actually through education. So that's what kind of gets me out of bed every morning. That's what drives me. But, you know, PR in any industry, private sector, public sector, it's just really interesting, and you get to work with many different people across the whole organisation and talk about many different subjects.
Yeah, it is really interesting in that sense. You also seem to have a very strong sense of place as well. That, you know, you might have gone to Yorkshire for a short spell, but you came back across, and you've kind of focused your energy and efforts over the years in this neck of the woods.
I have. I've come back from the Pennines, a short stint from the other side, yes, and really enjoy working in Lancashire and the Northwest region. It's where my roots are. It was where I was born, and that kind of making a difference to the communities that I live in, it really matters to me. And, you know, there's some great networks, isn't there, in Lancashire, some great PR networks. A lot of the people who work in senior roles within the public sector know each other, collaborate, share stories, have a shoulder to cry on if you need it. So, yeah, it's a great place to work in this area, isn't it? And very can-do and positive place to be.
That's a brilliant place to leave it. Ginette Unsworth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to PR in the Real World. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a quick review. Your support really helps spread the word and reach more marketing and PR professionals just like you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from the insights we share. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more tips, strategies and real world stories from the PR frontlines.